So of course, anytime we do go to early 2001, what most people want to talk about is the death of WCW. But we've already talked about that on other episodes of Retro Ups and Downs. But all you need to know is that everything was falling into the sea, including Monday Nitro and Thursday Thunder, getting their worst ratings ever. Saying that if you compare them to now, I mean, I tell you, we live in an ever-changing world, because Nitro did a 2.05 and Thunder did a 1.53. But for some context, Raw smashed out a 5.1. What was really nuts though is that during all of this, WWE was making more money than they knew what to do with, hence why they decided to go make a restaurant called WWF New York, and why over 15,000 fans headed to Vegas to watch No Way Out in 2001. But this just continued the theme of the day. No matter what you thought about Raw, no matter what you thought about SmackDown, and creatively they were stagnating just a little bit, WWE pay-per-views absolutely rocked. And this one was no different. You left every single one going, man, yeah, I had so much fun. Although I did notice once I finished watching it, that when you go through the finishes, you can't help but laugh, because this is what happened in every single match that didn't have a stipulation. Surprise roll-up, interference, title to the head, turnbuckle to the head. So clean endings have just never existed within WWE, and we've just all made it up. They weren't there back then, and they are not there now. Which means that actually, I am part of the problem. Why do I have all these expectations? Where did I pull this out of? It must have been my ass. This is like sitting down to dinner, going, oh, I can't believe I've got a salad when I wanted a pizza. Well, you chose, doofus, and yes, I'm now yelling at myself. Outside of all of this, Antonio Inoki kept going around doing press conferences saying Mike Tyson is coming to New Japan, and Mike Tyson never went to New Japan. And what was really sad is that if you try and research ECW news, most headlines just say, we don't have any ECW news because we're 99% sure that ECW is dead. And it was, it just hadn't been made official yet. There was some controversy, however, which was about to tie into the fact that Paul Heyman was going to have a lot of free time on his hands. Because Jerry Lawler's wife, Stacey the Cat Carter, got booted out of the WWE, which obviously left the King in quite the precarious position. Does he pick his wife, or does he pick his job? He went for the former. It meant that he left as well, which was quite a big deal because he was all over the shows at the time. And if you have read Jim Ross's autobiography, you will know this was actually quite an upsetting moment all around, because nobody truly knew what they should do. It's also bizarre because even on this show, the Cat and Jerry the King Lawler are involved in somewhat of a major angle. So she really must have pissed Vince McMahon off. Given that we did get a Triple H victory on this night too, the powers that be straight away went into, we should make WrestleMania 17 main event a three-way mode. And can you imagine if we had done that? WrestleMania 17, probably the best WrestleMania ever. It needed that one-on-one contest between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. And maybe we were this close for it to be changed. Thankfully it wasn't. But let's turn the clock back almost 20 years and up those downs for No Way Out 2001, which also drew quite the whopping 590,000 buys. And here we are and pay-per-view still going strong. Let's do it. What an absolute mess the start of No Way Out 2001 is. If anyone ever comes up to you and says, oh, can you show me a match which kind of sums up the Attitude Era, just go to this, The Big Show versus Raven for the hardcore title. My word. And why is this? Because it's not Raven versus The Big Show. It's them versus Bob Holly, the one Billy Gunn, the stupidest name ever, Molly Holly, Crash Holly, some ninja woman, Steve Blackman. People keep just turning up. And each one also has a weapon, so it's just carnage after carnage. And this ranges from popcorn to nunchucks. Which really begs the question what the hell some people were thinking. If you were presented with all of these and you go, oh, I'm going to take the popcorn, you're an idiot. Even the finish is chaos. After pretty much everybody else has won the championship using moves that would never work in any other match, the Big Show just chokeslams Raven and he is now the hardcore champion. But then Billy Gunn tries to clothesline him over the rope and that goes badly, and then the Big Show's music starts playing, so he punches Billy Gunn right in the face. I had no idea what was going on. With all that said though, I mean, it barely goes 5 minutes. You can't be bored. And also, as already stated, Steve Blackman is in it. And Steve Blackman is one of my favourite wrestlers ever. It's kind of like he just snuck in the company and no one noticed. Also, it is far better than the 24/7 stuff we've got going on now. Now, I bet I wouldn't be saying that back in 2001 because it's all about context. But still, I had a rollicking good time. Also, there was a ninja woman in this. And obviously, back then I knew who it was. But now I don't. And I'm really intrigued. And I can just Google it. I mean, I did, but that's not as fun. Saw Kurt Angle arriving after this, and he was super proud given what he had done to The Rock a few days prior. And then you cut to an interview with Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. As I'm sure you can figure out, it's not an easy watch. They said they were going to help each other out even though they were going to be in a fatal four-way match, and the best part is that Jim Ross loses his mind here. He's all like, you can't help each other out in a fatal four-way match? That's against the point. I love JR. And okay, right, before we do get to Benoit versus Eddie Guerrero versus X-Pac versus Chris Jericho for the Intercontinental Championship, we do need to discuss X-Pac's entrance music. Because you know the deal. It starts off with some guy shouting, X-Pac, and then another guy comes in and goes, X-Pac. It makes all the sense in the world. But it doesn't. Because the internet actually claims that the first person goes, make some noise! And sometimes it does sound like that, and sometimes it doesn't sound like that. But if you check out every lyric site there is, they all go with make some noise, but I can only hear X-Pac. It's like that stupid dress meme thing that took over the internet a few years ago. Anyway, that doesn't matter, and also unsurprisingly, this was very good. The subplot was that Benoit and Eddie actually were helping each other out in the early going, so we were all waiting, seeing who was going to turn first. And Eddie Guerrero at one point was on the top rope as Benoit had X-Pac in the crossface going, should I jump on them or should I not jump on them? And then he had his decision made for him because Chris Jericho just shoved him off the top. The whole point of this though was to start the journey to turn Benoit into a good guy, hence why Just Incredible ran out at one point to help X-Pac and Benoit just slammed him and knocked him on his ass. Just Incredible actually falls kind of uncomfortably. Eddie and Chris then eventually go to war, and we all know that these two are very good wrestlers. We don't need to discuss it. And of course it is the finish where I have yet more evidence about when it comes to the things I do like on Ups and Downs and the things that I don't. So yes, it is more proof for my Ups and Downs canon, and no, that is not a reference to my penis. But the reason that I always talk about surprise roll-ups in WWE is because you can zoom back to 2001, and when we did have a match where officials were like, well, we're not 100% sure who should win here, they always went back to the most devastating move in sports entertainment. Because we wanted to keep the Intercontinental Championship on Chris Jericho, but we really didn't want to beat anybody else, so as soon as there was a fracas towards the end, Chris uses this on X-Pac, and he gets the 1, 2, 3, and then he just runs away like, ha, I managed to steal it. So that's why it grates me. It's been happening for 2 decades. This was really easy to watch though, and you could take it and plonk it in any promotion today, and nobody would even blink. And we also start needing to give more credit to Sean Waltman, aka X-Pac. He is just the best, and yet people just go, stupid X-Pac heat. I don't care about that. What a terrific professional wrestler. Saw Triple H getting ready after this, and he's really mad, and he's just going, as he used to do. And then we cut to William Regal and Vince McMahon, and these two are just gold. Because Regal had set up the match between Stephanie McMahon and Trish Stratus, and Vince McMahon sits down with him here and basically talks in riddles going, well, you know what I want you to do, William, so make sure you do it. And as soon as Vinnie Mac has left, William is like, well, I have absolutely no idea what he's talking about. I'm boned. We then cut to WWF New York, where Test is, and he is asked about the upcoming match between Stephanie McMahon and Trish Stratus. And he says he doesn't care what happens, he's just excited to find out who the biggest hoe bag in the WWF is. That's what he said. Down. Test also looks like a hairdresser here, and we get an advert for WWF Music Volume 5, which if you buy, gives you some kind of special The Rock web browser. A special The Rock web browser. I was so happy. You would then assume that we were in for a nightmare, because yes, again, it is Stephanie McMahon versus Trish Stratus. Let's just run that back one more time. It is Stephanie McMahon versus Trish Stratus. This just proves though that in 2001, WWE somehow could do no wrong. This is pretty damn good for what it was. It is also hilarious because halfway through William Regal does come out here, and it could be the best performance in the history of performances. You can just see on his face, it is etched into his emotions. He has no clue what he's meant to do, and at one point he probably should just start twirling around because his brain starts malfunctioning. And I assume that this was all inserted as some kind of safety net, but I don't even think that Stephanie and Trish needed it. They're doing DDTs, they're doing slams, all of it is fine, all of it is good, and there's a couple of close near falls that made you go, oop, I thought it was done. Still though, the highlight of all of it is when Regal trips the referee and then puts Trish Stratus onto Stephanie and McMahon, but then absolutely freaks out and goes, oh no, maybe I've got it wrong. So he grabs Stephanie's foot and he puts it on the rope and he even taps the ref's shoulder and goes, oh, you better stop it. The poor man is crumbling. This also didn't impress Trish Stratus at all, so she just went and slapped William Regal. And unfortunately, he does have a short temper, so he hits her with the neck breaker, which allows Stephanie McMahon to win. And then you can just look into the camera like, oh, I hope that was the right thing to do. I have no idea. Of course, this is not what Vince McMahon wanted at all, and he is irate with William Regal afterwards and says now he's going to make a match. It's going to be Vince McMahon and Trish Stratus taking on William Regal and Stephanie McMahon. What a flippin' time it was to be alive. However, we do know how all of this ends at WrestleMania 17 with one of the biggest reactions ever for Linda McMahon, who gets on up out of a wheelchair. So you tell me. We also then had the dumbest question ever asked by Michael Cole. He finds Stone Cold Steve Austin in the back and he says, "Hi Steve, can you tell me how you feel that you're about to enter hell?" And Austin just looks at him like he just slapped his mum. It was the correct look. And then we do get Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Triple H in the 3 Stages of Hell contest. And flub me sideways, this is still brilliant 2 decades later. If you've never seen it, you need to make sure you change that today because it is violent, it is brutal, it is bloody. And if you wanted to tell me this was Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin at the peak of their powers, I'm not going to argue with you, but I'm going to give it a golden up. The whole thing had been played as well, that Triple H was a great professional wrestler and Steve Austin was just a brawler, hence why when we came to round number 1 and it was a straight up wrestling contest, Triple H was the favourite. And of course, that's why Steve Austin won it. Filled with spots that you'll recognise from any Ric Flair match, and I'm not going to complain about that because the Nature Boy is the best. This is just such a good back and forth encounter, made even better because the fans are going wild. Steve Austin just got crazy reactions every single night, as you know, but hearing it today, my word, it's like adrenaline in your bones. He also wins after a Stone Cold Stunner, and because round 2 was a street fight, they don't even take a minute before they're on the rampway, just slewpexing each other into the floor. And then there's a bunch of chairs and everybody's getting smashed in the head. It changes so quickly, it's almost like you don't know what's going on. I mean, the escalation is absolutely hilarious, especially when Austin goes, oh, look what I found, and it's a barbed wire 2x4, and then the pair are on the announce tables, and the rattlesnake back body drops the game through the other one, and the height that Triple H gets. I know I'm looking up there, but honestly, that's how high it was. If he had landed this badly, he probably would have died. There's also a little bit of an insider thing here, because after Austin has been smacked in the head with yet another weapon, he blades himself, and if you have a precarious eye, you see him put it on the announce table, and Jerry Lawler just goes whoop, and smashes it off. And then when we get back in the ring, Triple H has his sledgehammer, and he cracks Austin in the skull, and never forget when he does do that, this is a murder weapon. I don't care if you're in the real world, I don't care if you're in the fake world. If you hit somebody in the head with a sledgehammer, they're gonna die. It does allow him to follow that up with a pedigree though, meaning now it's 1-on-1, and as you see the steel cage coming down from the sky, you just can't help it. There is so much excitement. What are they gonna do now? It still somehow picks up again because now they are surrounded by metal, but also there's more chairs, they still have the sledgehammer, and they still have this flipping 2x4 with barbed wire around it, and they just keep hitting each other as the blood keeps flowing. You also get some great near falls as Austin kicks out of the pedigree and Triple H kicks out of the Stone Cold Stunner, and the finish is so well worked here, only ruined by what WWE was going to do post-WrestleMania. Because in true Rocky fashion, Austin hits Triple H with the 2x4 and Triple H hits him with the sledgehammer, and because they're both so exhausted, they collapse onto the mat, but luckily for the game, he falls on top of Austin, that counts as the pin, and Earl Hebner has no choice but to go 1, 2, 3. JR and Jerry Lawler make sure to go like, oh, well, nobody's actually won, that was a massive fluke. And of course, the idea behind it was that Austin would win the World Championship at WrestleMania, then Triple H could come up the next night on Raw and go, well, I think I should have the first shot. I beat you a couple of months ago, and instead we just gave birth to the 2-man power trip. Now look, I did like the 2-man power trip, but did it make any sense? No, it did not. We don't need to worry about any of that though, because it was 20 years ago and I like to have real problems. And the only thing that sucks here is that some idiot in the crowd throws a beer right onto Stone Cold Steve Austin's head, and he does recoil like he has been shot. That really must have hurt. He then gets to his feet and gives Triple H another Stone Cold Stunner, because we can't end any event in 2001 without Stone Cold Steve Austin's music playing. But look, That's what the fans wanted. They were cheering him here, even after a 40-minute match, and the fact he lost. Sometimes I think we forget just how over the Rattlesnake was. He was like some kind of damn hero. Even with all that though, if you do listen attentively enough, you will hear quite a sizable amount of the crowd cheering for Triple H, and this ties into another rumor from the time. Because when The Rock was doing his "oh, I'm a cool heel" shtick, apparently Triple H would walk around going, "I can't believe it, he never sells," and he never acts like a coward. And yet when Triple H was on top here as the best bad guy in the company, he was doing exactly the same, and that made him an absolute badass. So what happened with The Rock happened here again. Who knows if it's true? I'm just telling you what I read. It was then Jerry Lawler versus Stevie Richards. And I worried that I'd fallen into some kind of portal and entered an alternative reality. And actually, the match they had is more than fine. But do you know what the stipulation is? If Jerry Lawler wins, the cat will get naked, as if that's some kind of victory. But if Stevie Richards wins, he gets to take her away and turn her into some kind of right-to-censor person. I can't even think of the words. Yes, I can. Down. And this ended when the cat accidentally hit Jerry Lawler with the title belt. But what I couldn't believe is that after Stevie Richards gets the 1, 2, 3, the rest of Right to Censor come out here and they put the cat in a sack. They put her in a sack and then they just run away. And I know that it annoys some people, but I do not need this kind of Attitude Era stuff back in my life. Because we have to learn, we have to evolve, and we have to grow. And also, a sack. We then go straight to an Undertaker and Kane promo, because they're about to fight for the tag team championships. And Michael Cole asked the dead man about that, and he goes, "Michael Cole, do you think this is about the titles? Because it's not, but in the ring, it's about the titles." And I was like, what the flip is wrong with that guy? Kane then also says that they are literally going to take them to hell. Brother Destruction, really weird. We then clearly entered territory where we were trying to keep the 3 stages of hell as far away from the main event as possible to try and calm the crowd down. Because yeah, we were having a tag team title tables match contest. And it is the Dudley Boys versus Edge and Christian versus the Undertaker and Kane. And we always have to stick another stipulation in there because you can never have enough stipulations in 2001. Still though, once again up. The big question of course is figuring out, well wait a minute, Kane and Undertaker didn't win the titles here, so how the hell did WWE get out of this? Because if you were around 20 years ago, you will know every time the Undertaker and Kane were in any kind of a match, they just dominated and they just destroyed everyone. Like, if they had booked Undertaker and Kane versus your grandma Agatha in a bridge game, somehow the Undertaker and Kane would have won. The way we did do it though was interference from Haku and Rikishi, who I had totally forgotten had ever teamed up. As we have mentioned Haku, everybody don't move, he could be around here, and for the second time, he may try and murder me. But of course, just as the Undertaker and Kane were about to win, out come these two to stop it, and they brawl their way down the aisle, so we're just down to the Dudleys, and we're just down to Edge and Christian. And at exactly that point, Edge goes to spear Bubba Ray Dudley through the table. This table does not break, and he bounces off it like he's a cartoon. It still looks absolutely horrible, and do you know what the crowd do? They audibly go, ugh. They were not pleased. Instead, though, the Dudleys just grabbed Christian and 3D'd him through the tables in order to retain their championships. And look, all this is fine. It is the most Attitude Era match ever. We were then moments before our main event, so of course we had to have a promo with The Rock. And he just pretends to be a clock. He goes, tick-tock, tick-tock, Kurt Angle, your time is up. And he walked away. I thought it's a little bit odd. And it does lead into our last match of the evening, which is champion Kurt Angle taking on challenger The Rock. And everybody and their dog knew what was going to happen here. It was so obvious we were going to do Austin versus the Great One at WrestleMania. So the key was, well, how do we get out of this, but make sure that everybody knows the Olympic gold medalist is brilliant and that we love him? And the answer to that was to have a lot of shenanigans and have the commentary team just going, oh, that Kurt Angle, what a hero, I tell you, Kurt Angle, he could have my children, Kurt Angle is the best. It's good enough. Otherwise, this is just your usual carnage. Big Show both comes into his entrance music and leaves to his entrance music, and in the middle just choke slams everybody. And in that fracas, Kurt Angle has a 1, 2, 3 on The Rock, but there's no referee to count it. And talking of the referees, you may not believe this, but they actually steal the show. Because Earl Hebner and Jimmy White are carrying Mike Chioda out of there because he's been absolutely destroyed by a 7'2" guy. But when Earl Hebner, out of the corner of his eye, notices that there is a pinfall, he just drops his friend and gets back in the ring. I was like, Earl Hebner, what a piece of trash. As already mentioned though, it does come down to a turnbuckle that Kurt Angle had exposed. The Rock was like, well, this is fair game for me. But the extra best part of this is that after that, he walks into the rock bottom and the referee goes 1 and the referee goes 2. And even though nobody kicks out, Earl Hebner just goes, oh no, he kicked out because he has screwed up. And honestly, if there was something in this world where you're allowed to murder one person and there'd be no consequences, The Rock would have chosen this very time. The look on his face, he is not a happy pup. So he has to pick up Kurt Angle and just give him another rock bottom before turning to Earl again and going, you better do it this time, and not only get the 3 count, but become a 6-time WWE champion. This is quite fascinating back in 2001 because becoming a 6-time champion meant that he had broken the record. Before this, it was Hulk Hogan and Bret Hart who only had 5. And man, look where we are at today. Like Triple H, Randy and John Cena, they've all held the belt around about 72,444 times. And back here, 6 was like, oh my gosh, he's won 6. This also ties into how rubbish The Rock's reigns as WWE champion was. He only had 1 that went over 100 days. And on the 25th of February, he's winning it here, but you already know he's losing it in about 6 weeks at WrestleMania, which he did do. Kind of goes to show, if you know how to talk, you can do whatever you want. It's also yet another great pay-per-view in 2001, and I'm pretty sure that we'll get through all of them entirely, and I bet there's not a bad one amongst the bunch. It was arguably one of WWE's best year, and that's why it's getting up. And as always, we will close the show with Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer ratings. So the Big Show versus Raven got 1.5 stars. Chris Jericho in his big match got 3.5 stars. Stephanie McMahon versus Trish Stratus got 2.25 stars. And given that Meltzer sees 3 stars as average, that's pretty damn good. Triple H versus Steve Austin got 4.75 stars. Stevie Richards versus Jerry Lawler got 1.5 stars. Bubba Ray and Devon in their big tables match got 2 stars. And the main event scored a whopping 4.25 stars. Now, do you agree with those or do you not agree with those? Make sure you get in the comments right now and tell us, but don't vote for any shows next week because next week I am picking one. We are going to do the first ever episode of NXT because of course NXT has got a big anniversary right around the corner. Also make sure to like the video, share the video and subscribe. Head over to WhatCulture.com so you can just embrace yourself in everything to do with professional wrestling. Follow us on social media so you can do the same there. And look, there's more videos on the screen. Click them. Go watch some more. My name is Simon for WhatCulture. Thank you for joining me as always. If you are watching this on Friday, have a good weekend or just enjoy your damn day. See ya.